Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Thank you, Jordan. Um, it was actually really beautiful today as we were preparing to convene this community, this Mishkan that Sam just spoke about. And I was greeted by an image of a door opening and closing and people going in and out of that door in someone's Zoom screen, and was struck by how fitting that was for the kavanah, for the intent that I'm bringing today, which is centered on a beautiful poem that I encountered last summer called The Door. And when I think about doors in general in my own environment, I live in an apartment building where every time someone opens or closes their front door in the hallway that is off my apartment, the front door of my apartment, I can hear this little shudder. I can hear the building kind of quiver a little bit. I'm not sure why. It's maybe like a vacuum effect. And I've often wondered if my front door makes the same noise in other people's apartments as I'm closing and opening it, as I hear from my neighbors. And so I kind of smiled when I thought of that part of my daily reality when I re-encountered this poem that is entitled The Door by Miroslav Holub. And thank you to Jordan for sharing the screen. I'm going to go ahead and read that poem out loud. So if you don't have access to see it, or that's not the modality you're in right now, no worries. I'm going to read it, maybe read it twice even, so that we can kind of immerse ourselves in this metaphor of the door, and to also talk a little bit about how it ties into our Jewish spiritual practice. The Door by Miroslav Holub. Go and open the door. Maybe outside there's a tree or a wood, a garden, or a magic city. Go and open the door. Maybe a dog's rummaging. Maybe you'll see a face or an eye or the picture of a picture. Go and open the door. If there's a fog, it will clear. Go and open the door. Even if there's only the darkness ticking, even if there's only the hollow wind, even if there's nothing there, go and open the door. At least there'll be a draft. So I'm going to read it one more time. It has a little bit of a surprise ending. That's how I feel when I encounter this poem. So I'm going to read it one more time. Go and open the door. Maybe outside there's a tree or a wood, a garden, or a magic city. Go and open the door. Maybe a dog's rummaging. Maybe you'll see a face or an eye or the picture of a picture. Go and open the door. If there's a fog, it will clear. Go and open the door. Even if there's only the darkness ticking, even if there's only the hollow wind, even if nothing is there, go and open the door. At least there'll be a draft. So thank you, Jordan. We can take the poem down for the moment. I mentioned that this poem surprises me because it seems that there's hope of something beautiful, something positive, if we open the door. And then toward the end of the poem, there's a shift towards not knowing, towards darkness, towards wind, and then ultimately this draft, this blast of cold air that we might be greeted with if we take the risk and actually open the door. So I included, for those people who were looking on with the poem, a little bit of background information about the poet. The poem was written in 1961, when life in Czechoslovakia at that time, our poet is Czech, when life in Czechoslovakia seemed to hold out the chance for change and freedom. And then someone observed about this poem that, this poem may be about the dashed hopes that our poet experienced when Soviet forces invaded Prague in 1968. Maybe a foreshadowing of that. That feeling of there might be hope on the horizon, and there also might be the unknown or something unwelcome, or perhaps even danger implied by the biography of the poet. So this poem also made me reflect on the door in Jewish tradition. And when I think about the image of the door in Jewish tradition, I go to a verse from the book of Deuteronomy that is a part of the first paragraph of the Shema, in which we read about the divine invitation to place a mezuzah scroll on the doorposts of our home. And so I want to ask Jordan again, if you don't mind sharing the screen, and I'm going to, again, read out loud this beautiful text, which is a reflection on that verse and the reflection on what it means to consider opening the door, going through the door. And this was written by Melanie Grunwald, who is a part of the Kabbalah experience in Denver, Colorado. So she writes, with regard to the verse from the Torah, the book of Deuteronomy, where we read, and write these words on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. The basis of placing a mezuzah on exit and entryways is to affix the central teaching of Judaism, the Shema prayer, wherever and whenever we come and go. Our movements can be conscious or unconscious, purposeful or unintended. When we come from the public domain into the private domain, or exit from the private domain to the public, we pause at the mezuzah. The tradition is to kiss the mezuzah as we connect the prayer to ourselves, to our bodies. And it's a pause that informs us to reflect on where we are coming from and where we are going. To become more conscious of our exiting and entering, we may take note of how we close a door as we enter and exit a space. Without a conscious pause, we may enter and exit routinely. And then at the end of this text, she brings in a beautiful visual with the Hebrew alphabet. And she notes that the mezuzah is placed diagonally on the doorpost from left to right, which is parallel to the diagonal of the Hebrew letter Aleph. So if the Hebrew letter Aleph is not available to you as an image, no worries. Just know that the middle line, there's a line going through this letter that is on the diagonal. By picturing the Aleph as we pass through doors and gates, we are reminded of our intention to connect and to make whole our lives. And she notes that Aleph has the numerical value of 1 because it's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And so it creates an image of unity. Even if we don't know what the shape of the Aleph is, we know it's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it symbolizes unity. And in a Jewish mystical sense here, we have uniting what is above, divine sphirot, divine manifestations that are above us, and where we are anchored below in this earthly place, and also connecting what is inside of us to what is outside in the external world, and also what the door demarcates, which is the connection between private and public. And Jordan, thank you. You can take that text down. So I find both the poem by Miroslav Holub and this reflection by Melanie Grunwald to be very, very fruitful for our own reflection on how are we going about in the comings and goings of our lives. Are we aware of the noise the door makes? And And are we kind of taking that for granted or doing that in a quick or mindless way, entering, exiting? My husband once had a very long commute. We had 3 young children under the age of 5, and he would drive this very long and grueling commute. And then he would come into the house, and I was a stay-at-home parent at the time, and he would step up and bathe the kids and be present. And I always was marveling at how he could do this. How could he just come in from a long day and a commute and then be present for our children? And one of his tricks was he would sit in that car and do a little kavanah, do a little intent, a little bit of breath, a little bit of a liminal moment to acknowledge that he was leaving one domain and coming into another domain. And he was doing that with an acknowledgement that there might be a draft when he opened the door, right? He had no idea what was going on with me or with kids or with our day, right? He was acknowledging like, I'm going through this door. I don't know what's going to await me. But I'm going to do it with intent and with openness to try to be present with whatever it is that's on the other side of that door. So I invite you into that image today as you take your seats. And perhaps the image of the door is a painful image for you, or seems perhaps not accessible. And if that is true, if what I'm saying today is not resonating with you, the breath can always be an anchor or a part of your body. But for those of us for whom the door might be accessible, we might want to use our breath in this meditation to reflect upon our comings and our goings, to shine some light on where we might need some attention, need some awareness, where we might reach up and touch that mezuzah, either literally or figuratively, as a way of slowing ourselves down and creating awareness as we move from one place to the next. So we'll be in quiet meditation for the next 12 minutes or so, and then I'll bring us out of the meditation with another reading of the poem. Go and open the door. Maybe outside there's a tree or a wood, a garden or a magic city. Go and open the door. Maybe a dog's rummaging. Maybe you'll see a face or an eye or the picture of a picture. Go and open the door. If there's a fog, it will clear. Go and open the door. Even if there's only the darkness ticking, even if there's only the hollow wind, even if nothing is there, go and open the door. At least there'll be a draft.
Thank you for that teaching and guided practice, Susan. So rich and supportive. We're going to turn now toward mourners Kaddish and those who are marking the loss of a loved one or a friend or some other kind of loss are invited to share the names of those for whom they're reciting Kaddish in the chat. And those who are listening and not reciting Kaddish are invited to give your full presence and to unmute yourself when it's time to answer Amen or Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach L'Olam L'Omei Omayim. And so I invite you to rise with me in body or in spirit as we say Yitkadal, Yitkadal.
Amen.
לעילה מן ברכתה ושבתה, וחתה ונחמתה, נמיכן בעלמה קימינו אמן. יהי שם רבה ושמיה וחיים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל אמן. עשה שלום
Amen. Amen.
Amen. May the memory of this past be a blessing for us and the world and inspire us to acts of wisdom, compassion, loving kindness, and justice. I want to invite those who want to stay on for some questions and responses with Susan to stay on. I forgot to mention toward the beginning that we have a couple of upcoming IJS offerings. Let me just say a word or two about those quickly, and then we'll turn to Q and R with Susan. So first of all, our LGBTQ plus monthly mindfulness sit hosted by Rabbi Miriam Klotz and taught by this month's guest leader, Yiska Smith, is going to be today at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And Jordan will drop the link into the chat for those who may want to attend. And we're also going to be launching a 4-day mindfulness meditation intensive next week with Rabbi Dr. Mira Neshama Weil, truly, special, gifted, skillful, and deeply practiced teacher. And it's always nice to have, 4 days because you can actually build a set of skills through a particular arc of study and practice. So I want to invite you to check that out too. That's Monday through Thursday of next week. So if you are taking off, be well, stay healthy and safe. And if you're sticking around, we'll turn now to some questions and responses. And firstly, I just want to say thank you, Susan, and make sure that, I understood the teaching. So I'm just going to paraphrase it briefly, and you'll tell me if I got it right or, add any changes if, or corrections if necessary, so kind of what I took away personally is that, in each and every moment of our lives, there's an opportunity to open a door. And even as we make transitions from one episode or one moment that's passing and coming to an end into the next moment, right? We have a choice about whether we open a door or keep the door closed. And the way that we can open the door is really by bringing our intentionality and our full presence in each moment. And we don't ever know exactly what's going to be there, when we arrive in the next moment, and then the next moment, and then the next episode, and the next chapter. But if we can set our intention as your husband did so skillfully in the car before making the transition, there's a chance that when we find ourselves in the next moment or the next episode, that we'll arrive there fully with intention, with presence, and with skill. So I just want to make sure I got that right before we turn to questions.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah, and that's what really drew me to the poem as well. So
Beautiful. I have a question or two of my own, but for those who may be sharing questions in the chat, please preface them with the word question and caps, and that way we'll be able to easily find them. And we won't have to search for them like a needle in a haystack. And I also just want to make a correction here because I mispronounced Susan's name. It's actually Rabbi Susan Leider. Thanks for that correction, Susan.
no worries.
Yeah. So that imagery of opening a door, and allowing the draft to be there, to me, it connotes movement, right? And the sense that things can actually be allowed to move through, pass through in some way, right? As opposed to trying to kind of block ourselves from the elements of our lives and try to freeze things, and keep them from moving and changing and evolving. And I'm wondering, how your practice helps you to kind of move with the currents of your life in a way that enables you to really open a door moment by moment by moment.
Thanks for asking. One of the things about the movement that I want to point out before I address your question, Sam, is one of the things that struck me about the end of the poem is that often a draft is coming in around the edges of the door of a window or underneath. Like you have an inkling of what that blast of cold air is going to feel like before the door is even open. Or we think we know, right? So like that's the story we create that can kind of sometimes prevent us from opening the door. So I was also really struck by that, the nature of the draft and how it can come full force, and it can also leak in around the edges and create trepidation, anxiety, and a story that we know what's going to happen when we actually don't. We just think we feel the draft and then we make something up in our heads. So I think for me, I have to say that this poem, spending time with this poem and preparing for today, made me aware of some of the doors that I haven't been opening because of my own fear or anxiety or surety that I know what's going to happen when I open the door. And so I was a bit unsettled in the last 24 hours, coming to this moment, because the poem kind of wormed its way into my heart and gave me a little bit of a prod to say, you know what, you've been avoiding that difficult conversation or initiating that difficult meeting. You feel uncomfortable. And it's a reminder that to not shy away from opening the door. And even I felt it in my body this morning. So even when I woke up this morning, I had some pain in a place I haven't had pain in for a while. And I kind of like, maybe that's that niggling of like, you don't want to open that door, but you know that you need to. And indeed, after we finish this call in a bit, that's one of the things I kind of moved up my list today, right, was to attend to that. So I think that's an example of how through this spiritual practice of reflecting and then also being in quiet and paying attention to the body are all pathways to making different choices than what we've been making.
Thanks. That's so helpful. Just checking here on the chat to see if we have any questions that have come in. We have a question here from Lori. Thank you for this beautiful practice and for the imagery of the center line of the Aleph, bringing the heavens to us on earth, pointing inside our homes. So do we kiss our fingers and then touch the Shema, right? Bringing our heart in devotion to God, or do we touch the mezuzah and then kiss our fingers, bringing God into our hearts through pause and with love? Both are good. Wondering your thoughts.
What a beautiful question, Lori. So the custom that I'm familiar with through kind of traditional Jewish practice is to touch and kiss. So Sam, I don't know if you've ever studied or heard about the reverse of that. I have not, but you're smiling, so I don't know. Maybe you've encountered that as well.
No, I'm with you as well. You know, the way that I was taught is that you touch and then, you know, bring your hand to your mouth and kiss. Yeah.
But I think Lori's Chiddush, Lori's innovation with this is really beautiful, right? Because if we're striving towards unity, the cosmic unity, you know, Kabbalistic unity, unity in the world, kind of beyond our physical understanding of the world, what we bring to the Torah scroll is as important as what the Torah scroll brings to us, right? That's the unification. So I just think, thank you to Lori for lifting that up.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Even our mystical tradition, there's this notion of awakening from below and awakening from on high, right? And the question is whether, you know, we're going to God through our practice, opening a door to the divine so the divine can come in. God is trying to kind of push God's way into us from, you know, a transcendent dimension of reality.
Yeah, I love that image too, because if we kiss and touch, it's like we're bringing a gift to the divine, you know, in other spheres. Yeah, so there's the drawing down and then there's the drawing up through both. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. So in your own life, you know, what are the ways that you open a door for the divine through this practice? How do you bring God into yourself?
Well, slowing down is a huge part of it. Whether it's slowing down through meditation, sitting, or, you know, setting the kavanah, setting the intent before you change into a different physical location. But all of that involves slowing down. And so I just think it's increasingly countercultural to slow down. So whatever it is, to slow down our speech, to slow down our fingers on the keyboard or our quickness to respond. You know, I have 3 children. One of them had a baby on about 9 days ago. And one of the things that really struck me through this period of waiting and not knowing, as she was in labor, is how quickly we've come to expect news bites and updates, right? And the waiting and the not having information is its own spiritual practice. It was extremely difficult to go 5 or 6 hours and not know what was going on. And I think that's heightened by the world we live in. So it was a reminder for me that we are continually speeding up, and we need to really set an intent to slow down, whether it's through sitting or slowing our speed, you know, whatever, all the different ways in which we can slow down. Choose a little more sleep instead of choosing to cross another thing off our to-do list, or choosing to be bored instead of choosing to scroll, or, you know, whatever it is.
Thanks. That's instruction well taken. And it's
aspirational.
Yeah. But beautiful and so important to remember that. We have a question from Kumba. what if we're afraid to open the door for fear of what we might encounter? And I believe you hinted at this already, but maybe you can say a little bit about this, because I think for a lot of us, it's real, certainly for me.
He and our poet also really kind of outlines this through moving through darkness and then hollow wind, which kind of hints at the draft that closes the poem. So these things for me are all the metaphors for fear or aversion, things we don't want, things we don't like, things we want to turn our eyes away from. And so I identify with that. In my own experience today in this moment, the door that I was afraid of opening, I'm afraid of asking the question of someone that I need to ask. I'm afraid of the answer I might receive. And yet, I acknowledge in myself that fear is kind of seated in thinking I know what's going to happen. Right. And so that's a trick, it's a trap. And so part of it is for me is to trust what is not known. And that's awfully scary. But the alternative is that we're going to feel it in our bodies, we're going to feel it in our movement through the world if we hold that back and base our decisions on fear.
Yeah, thanks for that. So valuable. And a reminder that, we, in this practice, right, we're cultivating a beginner's mind, letting go of preconceptions, presumptions, biases, prejudices, and really opening up to the kind of inherent freedom and possibility of what's arising now, which is always fresh, always unrehearsed, right? Always new.
Yes, whether we like it or not.
Absolutely. Well, this was really so wonderful, and so grateful to have you here as our teacher and guide. And my understanding is that you come back virtually on a monthly basis. So
Yeah.
how blessed for us, and want to wish you well and thank you again for your teaching and guidance today, and wish everyone well here today. We'll be back here again tomorrow, same time, same place. And in the meantime, be well.